I'll hand over to John.
Thank you very much. Okay, my name's John, and as Bob says, I'm with Fairhursts Design Group, for at least for the last 4 weeks. Hopefully being able to pick up the work that Laura did and Mark and try and make something of that as well. I was one of the volunteers that Laura was after in that little talk there, but I volunteered after Rob's gave the same speech 2 meetings ago for people to present presentations on plugins, and my favourite plugin is Enscape, so I'm going to talk to you about why I think that's the case. Use it an awful lot, and it is probably one of the most useful tools from Revit that I found in design team meetings and on site. So I hope you gain something from this. The model I'm using is one of the sample files that anyone can download from the Enscape website. You can download a 14-day trial. It's not very long, but it's enough to give you a flavour. And I've taken the decision to do this as a live demo because to be meaningful you need to see how it performs in terms of its speed and the facilities that it offers you. One of the things that you can't do with Revit really well on these design team meetings is to actually present directly from the model. It's cumbersome and difficult to navigate around in that kind of environment, and it's a bit tricky to find your way back to various places that people find interesting. With Enscape, it takes your Revit model and just ups it a notch, and it produces some fairly decent real-time renderings from the model. It's never going to be a 3ds Max, it's not that good. It's not particularly good at any individual thing, but as a collection of tools, it's actually one of the best that I've come across for Revit. So it installs as a plugin, so it's straightforward. You go straight in to the menu, and you can choose your starting view from any of the 3D views that you've already set up in Revit. And I'm just going to use this initial view, which is there for the purpose. Click on Start, and you'll see how quickly it generates a rendering from that scene. Now, with very complex models, you will be waiting for a few minutes for this to happen, but once it's loaded, it is real time without much in the way of jitter or anything like that. For very big models, you need a very powerful machine. It will either work or not. There's no halfway. There's no halfway deal with that. If you've got a really complex model, it just refuses to run it. They are working on a lightweight version that will run on low-spec machines. And the developers are very open about what they're doing, they're very open to input, and they're very proactive in communicating with users. Searching for head-mounted display. That's a new one for me because I don't have one. So, right. It has opened the model, which is down below us. It's not letting me move. Okay. You have to excuse the. Yeah, it's. Sorry? There is. Let's get the. Yeah.
The 3D view drop down.
Yeah. Keep going, right? Yeah, disable. Yep. Correct. Okay. Okay, and it is, for those of you familiar with computer games, it's based on a computer game engine, and you drive it in pretty much the same way that you would drive a computer game. There's even the same key sets to move you forward. It does work with other devices if you've got things like a space mouse. Absolutely brilliant to drive it around. The trouble is if someone else is watching and you're just a little bit too quick, you do make them feel a little bit nauseous. So be careful on that. And as you can see, it's done a pretty stunning rendering of the foliage in that just from native Revit. Those are just the out-of-the-box Revit entourage. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail shortly. You can control the speed, it's just straight from the keyboard. It's just so you can go faster in there. If you want to walk on the surface, so you're in fly mode, just a single keystroke on the spacebar drops you onto the ground, so you're in walk around mode. grass is pretty realistic there, and I'll talk about the grass material when we look at materials a little later on. And as you can see, the water is nicely rippling away in the pool there. If you actually stop looking around, the water stops moving as well, but that's presumably because they're expecting you to take a screenshot at that point. So moving around the scene in walk mode. We're in fly mode, yeah, walk mode. If you try and walk through the walls, it won't let you, but it'll let you walk through doors that are shut. As long as they're called doors in Revit, it will quite happily let you through there. So we're just wandering around, and if you find a scene that you like, you can go back to your menu, go into there, and you can just say create view and give it a name. We'll just leave the default there, Enscape view 5, and that's now created a new view in Revit. So at another session you can immediately come back to this. If it's a favourite view, all you have to do is on these initial views here, if you want to go back to that one again, you can just click on this star and it will add it to the favourites, and I'll show you in a moment how to jump to those. And we can, as I say, wander around, and it's perfectly good for showing a nearly realistic rendering of your model, and in real time. Okay. You can play with the lighting, so if you hold the shift key down and the right mouse button, you see at the bottom right hand corner of the screen it's changing the time of day, and if you've got lights in your model, it turns them on when it gets dark. Okay. Nothing to do in Revit at all, this is purely reading exactly what's in there. So if your MEP engineers have put the information into their model, it will give you a fairly accurate rendering of the lighting. If you want a really accurate rendering, it will actually take in the IES data, so the lights should perform exactly as they're intended to be. So again, you can fly around, and I've gone underneath, so you can zoom up and out and look around. You've got full control over the sky. This mouse isn't. You promised me this worked on any surface. Okay, doesn't want to. Okay.
Use the piece of paper.
Might have to. Yep. Okay, so that's it. There are some preset views, and they are accessed from the num keypad, which this machine doesn't seem to have. Okay. Strategy. Nope. Can't see it. Okay. You can actually go to a top-down plan view or any of the 4 elevation views, and you can return back to your original starting view. If you want to go to your starting view, on the right-hand side, any of your favourite views, including the one that we saved earlier, you can jump straight back to it, and it remembers the settings and will take you to the exact same scene. So if there's a particular issue on the project that you need to demonstrate to the people on site or to the clients, you can save that as a view. There is a viable workflow for clash monitoring with Enscape. It's not really on the same par as using something like Navisworks or other specialist tools, but it's perfectly viable if you want to generate screenshots and highlight the issues. When you've got a scene that you like, if you want to generate a screenshot, you go back to the menus in there, you can just simply do screenshot to file, and you've got the option of saving it, naming it as you do, either as a PNG file or a JPEG. You'll notice that you've also got options for creating panoramas. I'm not going to generate that now because that does take a few minutes, but you've got the choice of taking a static, so it's a single point panorama, either in stereo or mono mode, so that you can upload it to the Enscape website and access it on any camera that's got Google Cardboard on. I can show you that later. I'll give you the link later if you want to try that one out. There are different modes of rendering. So if we look at the settings, you can choose to go into something called white mode. and that's an instantaneous change. And the model, as you see, is now rendered all in white. Let's get back to daylight. Come on. You can see the moon's going up there. Right. You can see even the grass is rendered in monochrome there. You can outline anything in the scene, and the strength of that outlining you can adjust. And if you go back to the rendered view, the outlining still takes effect, so it actually gives the image a really nice character, I feel. You've got options to change things like the exposure, so if you think it's too dark, you can adjust the brightness by turning off auto, so your exposure can be adjusted to whatever you think is right for the scene. The motion blur is to do with when you're moving around the scene. It blurs the scene to sort of imply motion. And you've got automatic resolution. If you want to reduce the resolution, if you're on a lower powered machine, you can do that. At the moment it's set to ultra, which is the highest quality, which is what you'd probably want for final presentation. You can switch to a 2-point perspective, and that immediately adjusts the verticals so that they always, no matter where you're looking, they'll always stay upright, if that's your preferred style. And you can switch to something called a light view. The light view is a simulation of light intensity in the model. It will work with both natural light and artificial lights. There is no suggestion that this is an accurate lighting simulation, because you've got full control over the start and finish lux levels, so you can choose to make it lighter or dimmer according to the settings that you're working with. But it gives you a decent feel for where the illumination is falling within the building. Never replace your MEP engineer's calculations, but we can hope someday. And that's something, again, you can just turn on or off as you need. If we go and have a look at this chap over here, just close him down. In fact, I'll tell you what we'll do, because I've actually got a saved view for the cars. If you go into Revit, you can select a different view, and I've got one here called Cars, and it's got this live update option running all the time, so it will jump to the scene that you pick. So this guy and his cars there the cars are actually models, but the guy's entourage. We'll have a look at the entourage in more detail shortly, but it takes the standard Revit figures you get, the ones that are the two intersecting planes, and you get a photograph that comes with it, and it substitutes internally a figure for those. If you've got an RPC account, then the range of figures you've got is 5 minutes, thank you. Yep. You can have a play with more of them. One of the things that you can do, if I close that rendering down, in Revit you very often create yourself cutaway views. So for example, we've got a cutaway view here, which for some reason Revit is leaking, but never mind, of a staircase. You can choose to render that on its own. So in Enscape you get just the elements that you want in the render. Again, a powerful tool if you want to focus on some geometry, such as the way a staircase is working. Okay. Quick look at some materials. So if I open a different file, and as Matthew said earlier, it's the materials that make or break these things. Again, we can render that. Again, this is a file anyone can download from the Enscape website. So I guess there's nothing to stop you using these materials in any other rendering. But this shows how Enscape deals with some complex materials. For example, their chain link fence, which it's rendering in that sphere, and metallic objects with the reflections, so it's reflecting the environment. You can take your own photos on the site and create your own skybox. So in other words, you need a 360-degree panorama from the site, and you can load that into Enscape, so you can see your own project in context, as well as these default contexts that we've got here. And finally, on this one, we look at transparency, and there's loads and loads of different glass materials available to you here. Now, Entourage, I promised you a quick look at that. 2 minutes, yep, okay. Where are we? It's not there anyway. Okay, it's not loaded. Sorry about that. There is an Entourage file that you can download that shows all of the Entourage. The grass that you saw earlier, nothing special required other than you need to have two things. You need to have a material that's got grass somewhere in its name, and you need to set the appearance colour to the shade of green you want the grass to be. And water, that again is just a material that has to be set to the liquid type. If it's not a liquid type, it won't render as water. And then you've got the sort of the size of ripples and everything else you can control from that material definition. But other than that, it requires no special input in terms of what the materials are. It benefits from using bump maps and proper specular maps in the materials that you define. Lots more I could go on to say, but I've run out of time. So I'm going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. So there's scope for more. I could have gone on for an hour, but never mind. As I said, my favourite plugin. Yeah, the one thing I know you're going to ask about is price. It's either a standalone license is either £34 a month or £335 for the year, or you can get a floating license which you can swap from machine to machine for £503 a year. Any other questions?
Thanks, John. Any questions? Quick questions?
Can you walk up the stairs?
You can, yes. In walk mode, it actually, whatever surface you're on, you could walk on cars and stuff like that if you want. It actually goes up the stairs. I mean, it does the normal jump between each one, but yeah.
Can you put a doom gun in front of it?
I knew I was going to be asked this. You can put guns in there, but they won't work, and you can't put monsters in there. No.
Who did that research? Thanks, ladies and gents.